Hello and welcome. So get cozy, grab a hot drink, and settle in as I share the books that I am planning to read and enjoy in the month of November. I am reading They Found Him Dead by Georgette Hare for the Cozy Reader Book Club choice for November. This is actually part of the Superintendent Hannah series. I think it's the third one in the series. But from my research and what I've heard other people say, it's not imperative that you read the books in order. And this actually gets really great reviews. And so this is the book choice for November. This sounds like one of those manor mysteries where everyone is combined in one place and there is a murder that happens. In this case, it is Silas Kane. He is gathering everyone together for his 60th birthday, and it's thought that he got lost in the fog and died during this birthday gala. But it turns out that then his heir ends up dead as well. And that's when they bring in the detective, which is Superintendent Hannah, to uncover what is actually going on. I think from what I can tell, there are a lot of characters. I actually was thinking I might actually write them down and really get serious about trying to figure out who done it. So like get a chart and write some of it down. So I might actually make this a really interactive experience. I have read one of Georgette Hare's Regency romances. I've not ever read any of her mysteries, so I'm really excited to dive into this month. Another book club read that I am choosing is to read A City of Bells by Elizabeth Goudge. She has 3 books that are like known as the cathedral books. I think they've actually printed them in an omnibus, even though they're not actually related. But this is one of them. I love this beautiful vintage copy and the Mylar cover protecting it. So in this, we follow Jocelyn Irvin. He is a young man who comes across Henrietta, who is a young orphan, and Hugh Anthony, who's a couple years older than Henrietta, but I think they are friends, or maybe she's been adopted or fostered into Hugh Anthony's family. Jocelyn also meets an actress, and I think the fates of these characters sort of intertwine. Henrietta has known in the past a poet who has done sort of these whimsical, magical connections, I think, within her life. And so I think she's really trying to seek and find this poet or find out more information. One of the things I love the most about Elizabeth Goudge's tales is the whimsy and magic that she infuses in all of her stories. So they usually have a faith base, but there's always a little bit of magic in her tales, and I love that so much. So I actually have already read the sequel to this tale, not realizing that the Henrietta in A City of Bells is the same Henrietta for which Henrietta's house is named. But I'm not concerned about it, even though I kind of see where this ends up. I think the intrigue and the fantastic elements that Elizabeth Goudge infuses in her writings will be more than enough to keep me kind of guessing and wondering, even though I have read the second book. I should say, I am reading A City of Bells with the Elizabeth Goudge book club that Julie Whitmer runs on Instagram. She also has a Substack membership as well. And so depending on when Julie schedules the discussion for this, I may actually join her Substack group so that I can join in on the discussion. This is really the first book in months that I have read to join that group, and I'm really excited. I love the Elizabeth Goudge book club. So the next sort of read along that I'm going to do is Nonfiction November. I'm reading a book that I have wanted to read and have started, but have not gotten very far, and that is The Life and Crimes of Agatha Christie by Charles Osborne. I have read other biographies of Agatha Christie. I have not read, I think she wrote an autobiography, but I am so intrigued by that period of, I think, 11 days in which she went missing, and sort of like her unhinged escapade. And I don't think her autobiography really dives into that very much. And so I'm hoping that Charles Osborne does. It comes with photos, which I love throughout actually the book. And it's pretty hefty. And so I am very stoked to be starting this and have all intentions of getting this finished for Nonfiction November. All right, you guys know I love a theme. I can't help it. I've realized that pretty much all of the fiction books that I have chosen for the month of November have a black theme. So here we go. I have By the Pricking of My Thumbs by Agatha Christie. So to follow that Agatha Christie nonfiction choice, I am reading one of her Tommy and Tuppence mystery books. I have not read any of them. This is definitely out of order. So I know there are people who are serious about orders in series. I'm terrible at it. But I have never read a Tommy and Tuppence, and I am really excited. I found this in a used bookstore this summer. I love this vintage copy. So in By the Pricking of My Thumbs, Tommy and Tuppence visit Tommy's aunt in like a assisted living facility. And unfortunately, his aunt passes away. But through their visiting, they have met someone named Mrs. Lancaster. And Mrs. Lancaster, I think, left a memory on them. And after Tommy's aunt passed away, Mrs. Lancaster sort of suddenly departs from this Sunny Ridge assisted living place. And Tuppence really has her interest piqued in this and decides that she is going to kind of follow the trail of where did Mrs. Lancaster go. I think it ends up in little English villages and in hillside cemeteries among tombstones. When Tommy returns from a short trip that he takes, he discovers that Tuppence never returned from her search for Mrs. Lancaster, and so he goes traipsing off after her. I like that it's sort of thin. It actually says in the marketing materials that this should have been titled By the Chilling of Your Spine. And so what a perfect November evening candlelit reading choice. Another used book that I found, I think, over the summer is Sidney Sheldon's Master of the Game. I have heard really great things about Sidney Sheldon. This was written in 1982. I have not read any of his works. I know they are adult in content and themes. Supposedly Master of the Game, like I looked on Goodreads, I think this is his most loved book. So we'll see how I like Sidney Sheldon. In this, we follow Kate Blackwell. Kate is also having a birthday party. She has invited, I think, the Blackwell family to celebrate with her, and she's having this big shindig. Kate comes from a family of means. I think she's very wealthy. And I think at her birthday party, she's got a murderer, a mental case, and someone who apparently has tried to kill her. It sounds like her family is a mess. But this is, I think, a sweeping family saga that lasts over a long period of time. I think we probably go back in the past to what Kate's ancestors did in diamond fields in Africa. I think it also moves into Paris and Europe, and I think it's just, again, that sweeping family saga with a lot of distrust and secrets and behind the scenes deals. I think it does deal with families of money, and so there's a lot of wealth and intrigue. And so I'm excited to read my first Sidney Sheldon this month. Babel by R.F. Kuang was on my TBR last November, and I did not get to it. I am going to kind of tamp down my expectations, realizing that I have so many other books that I want to get to. I am going to aim for just starting this and making my way through it and not necessarily expecting myself to finish it, because it is over 500 pages, but it's an enormous book. It's not 500 pages of a shorter book. This book is huge. And it deals with pretty difficult topics. In this, we follow a young boy who is orphaned, and he is kind of scooped up by this professor and brought to this training facility where he is learning all about, I think, languages. The entire plan for him is that he is going to be getting into Oxford so that he can join this Royal Institute of Translation, which is known as Babel. The interesting thing about this young boy who is an orphan is that he is Chinese. And obviously where Oxford is located in Britain, they are the imperialists. So this really dives into colonialism and empire controlling other cultures, as well as pulling in some elements of fantasy. So this, I think, is like alternate reality, historical fantasy. This young boy, because he is Chinese and is now kind of working through this Royal Translation Institute, he discovers a secret society that is actually working against the Institute. And they also have abilities and skills and powers, and they are trying to stop the empire. And so he, I think, is having to try to decide on which side he is going to support, because Britain ends up going to war in China, I think, for resources. And so again, you can see kind of the alternate reality portion of that, the historical fiction part of Britain as an empire, and then the fantasy elements, because there is a magic system in this. It's very robust and deep and complex. And again, I think just managing my expectations of get it started, get kind of engaged in it, and not feel the pressure of needing to finish it within a certain period of time will make this a more successful option on my possibilities list. The 13th Child by Erin Craig is my Gothic, hopefully pseudo horror choice for the month. I love this Barnes & Noble, beautiful gold edged version. Erin Craig is known probably best for House of Salt and Sorrow, which is the 12 Princesses Dancing retelling. She wrote a sequel to that, which I have and did read, and it really, really fulfills that Gothic horror theme for sure. There's a lot of creepiness in it. But in this, she does a retelling with a twist of the Grimm's Brother fairy tale of Godfather Death. And I think it's a pretty short tale, but she obviously really expounded on it. I think she did a gender switch as well. But in this, we have the 13th child of a very poor family. This 13th child, Hazel, when she's born, the family kind of shops around to different gods to find out who will be her benefactor, because they cannot afford her. And so they have multiple offers, but they settle on an offer from Death to be her godfather. And so he agrees and then promptly departs from her life until she is, I believe, 13. And when she turns 13, her godfather, Death, comes back into her life. And the way the fairy tale goes is that the charge of Death is given the skill to be a physician with herbs. And in this, that comes true. Hazel actually learns about herbs and learns how to save people's life. So it's almost like she's balancing her godfather, Death. I do think that Hazel ends up in a situation where she is having to choose between the attachment and affection she feels for godfather Death and saving someone that she has fallen in love with. So if you read the original tale, just as Grimm fairy tales are, it's the ending is a little bit abrupt and difficult. And so I'm hoping that Erin Craig gives me more of the happily ever after that I'm seeking in this. This has gotten pretty good reviews, and so I'm excited to dive into this month. Do I say that for every book as I'm putting them down? I'm excited to dive into this month. I think so. But really, I am. This was also on my TBR last year, I think in January. But our entire family got really sick from Christmas into January. It was really horrible. So my reading was like non-existent from mid-December until probably almost the end of January. We were sick and had issues for almost 6 weeks. Anyway, I really would like to get to this first book in the Rook and Rose series by M.A. Carrick. This is called The Mask of Mirrors. So really quickly, M.A. Carrick is actually a pen name for two authors who met in an archaeological dig in Wales and Ireland, and they met in a town that had the name Carrick in it, Carrick Macross, and they just really got along so well that they decided that they wanted to write together. I think they're anthropologists as well as writers, and so they have joined forces together and they wrote this series together. It's very thick. I think the other books in the series are also just as thick. So again, same with Babel. I think my goal with this is to not think that I'm going to be able to get through this in this month, but rather to just choose a certain part of it and to get through that and to really kind of get myself entrenched in it and just slowly get through it. With so many choices of books that I really do want to finish in November, this is one that I don't want to let the month go by where I don't at least start it. In this, we follow Ren. Ren is basically a con artist. She is coming into this really kind of glitzy city, and her goal is to con her way into being basically having a patron within a noble house. My understanding is that this really does show a comparison between like the underbelly, seedy part of a metropolitan city in comparison with sort of the glitzy, glamorous, wealthier parts of the city, and how the two of them actually are more similar, I think, than either one would admit. So I'm excited about the world building in this. I think the magic is very complex. I think the multiple character arcs are also pretty complex. In my attempt at taking this slow, I think it will work because I think it is sort of, especially since it's the first one, I think the plot development, we're kind of getting the background and the world building here at the beginning. This is also an adult fantasy, and so I'm really hopeful that there aren't elements in this that I'm really not fond of. So I will be sure to circle back and let you know. The YA fantasy that I am planning on reading this month is Serpent Sea by Maya Ibrahim. This is the sequel to Spice Road. This actually does not come out until I think the 19th of November. So I got the e-arc to read this. It's not a book that you hear a lot about, this YA fantasy. It does get pretty good reviews on Goodreads. I originally got this from Fairy Loot, read the synopsis, and thought it was intriguing, so I went ahead and got the subscription for that month, and I really enjoyed it, and so I am going to read the second one. Originally, it was going to be a duology. This was Maya Ibrahim's debut novel. I understand at this point that this is going to now be a trilogy, at least some sort of series. This book really reminds me of Sabaa Tahir's An Ember in the Ashes series, now continuing on with Air and that series. And something that I really enjoy about this series is that it's pretty chaste. So even YA novels now can kind of have more spice in them than what I'm looking for, and a little bit less fantasy. This world building I loved. It also reminds me of Dune a little bit with Spice Road. So in this we follow Imani. Imani is a magic wielder of metals, and so she's like a master whiz at a dagger. That's her skill. It's known as a shield. She is super skilled. The problem is her brother, who also had special capabilities, got caught transporting spice. Spice is mixed with a tea, and that is how you are able to get magical powers. And he is kind of dealing this spice, and that sort of indicates that there's drug market, addiction issues. And so by her brother getting caught, selling it and transporting it, it has brought shame on her family. Her brother is now gone, and she is having to track him down. She has told this council, who is basically the governing body, that she will travel and find her brother and bring him back to reckon with his crimes that he has committed. She has a band of people that go with her, a group of other young adults, as well as basically a djinn, a genie. And he obviously is a magical being and has magical powers. And so they basically have to go into the wastes, and the wastes are a desert. And they travel, so it is a journey book, travel through this desert, and there's all kinds of danger that occurs to them as she is trying to find out where her brother is and why he chose to deal in this market, in addition to discovering more and more about the Spice Road. I loved the world building in this, and so I'm excited to see kind of how this works. I'm a little disappointed that we're not just doing a duology. I feel like that could be an issue where we're kind of like hanging on to some of the plot lines that maybe if it was a duology, we would just kind of continue and move on instead of keeping them there so that we're like, you know, waiting to find out what the resolution is in book 3. But I can understand that when you have such success in your first book and your debut novel, I'm sure the publishers are like, hey, could you make it a trilogy? So that is my YA fantasy for the month. So I know I told you to get comfy and get something to drink, and we were going to settle in and do a TBR. But now that I've gotten through the books that I have at home, I actually have a really fun journey to take to get my last book for my TBR for November. So come along.
To Louise Penny. When I first started writing still life, I love reading series novels. Because I love getting to know the characters and seeing them develop and evolve, or not, just they become friends. So I knew that if I was very, very fortunate, this Still Life would be the first in the series. But I was also a realist, and I realized that chances of being published are so tiny, and really not increasing now. It's very difficult to find one of the big 5 publishers. So I knew that the writing of it would have to be reward enough. So every decision I made was selfish. I created a village I would choose to live in, totally fictional, but although inspired by the villages in my area. And the first thing I created was the bookstore in the village. It's what's more important than a bookstore. We can talk about nourishment. And then I peopled it with characters I would choose as friends, because I knew I'd have to be with them at least for a few years while I was writing that first book. And so that's what I did. I created, many of them inspired by real friends. I actually think of the books as one book with 19 chapters now. A very long book. But one book, because there's such a theme and thread and character development that goes all the way through it. And one of the themes that goes through it is a line from Auden, and it's in his poem to Melville. And he wrote, "Goodness existed, that was the new knowledge. His terror had to blow itself quite out to let him see it." So the books are about terror. The external terror, but also the terror inside ourselves that we carry as part of as part of almost a race memory, as part of in our marrow. But at the end of the day, if you can get past that terror, you'll find out that the world is a great place and goodness exists. And that's what the books are about. They're about the terror, but at the end, they're about goodness exists. Surprised by joy.
I am planning on reading The Grey Wolf by Louise Penny, and I was fortunate enough to get a signed copy and to also spend an hour of my life listening to her talk. Getting to experience that with my mom and my daughter was so fabulous. I learned that Louise Penny actually was a radio broadcaster, journalist. She was so engaging and just really spoke well and It just was such a wonderful, funny, heartwarming experience. And because of where I live, I also ran into Lisa Jo Baker and Christy Purifoy. I was definitely fangirling and talking to them, and it was surreal. So I had such a wonderful experience. And so here's my encouragement. If you hear about an author event in your town, I would really suggest going, because I just think it really connects you to the author. Being, involved in like a press tour experience is just so fun. So The Grey Wolf is the 19th book in Louise Penny's Inspector Gamache series. I'm not the best, as I tell you, at series, but this is a series where I have read all of the books prior to this one. I'm just so excited to be back in Three Pines, and absolutely am going to be picking this up immediately. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time.